Hi everybody, happy Monday and happy Memorial Day. I hope that this class has been going well for you so far. I wanted to use this time to both go over some general things to know about the class and some specifics on the terms and concepts to know for Chapter 2. First, I've gone ahead and graded your introductions. It was awesome to get to know all of you and your intro course activities. I've also started on grading your Chapter 1 activities, and I will have those done for you by Wednesday. If you ever have any questions about my feedback or disagree about your score on those, definitely let me know. I'd say across the board, people are doing really well on those. The biggest thing I'd encourage you to do is make sure that you're answering each part of the prompt, since I go ahead and sequentially grade following those. Make sure that you're regularly completing those quizzes as well, and just making sure that you have access to the textbook. Again, that ebook rental option is a good one if you haven't had the chance to get the textbook yet. In addition to that, if you ever need to get in touch with me for any reason, feel free to email me. I'd encourage you to use that bmanteaching@gmail rather than trying to message me through Canvas. bmanteaching just ensures that I can get back to you as soon as possible and gets a quicker response rate and makes it easier for me to attach files or do anything else that's needed. Otherwise, if you ever have any questions about any of the concepts discussed in the course or want to know any more information, feel free to send me an email if any part of an assignment is unclear, and so on. So, let's talk about Chapter 2. In Chapter 1, we laid out a lot of the fundamentals of argumentation, about making kind of fact, policy, and value-based claims, about the ultimate purpose of trying to convince and get adherence from relevant decision makers. Chapter 2 expands on that and gets us thinking, how do we assess what a good argument is? A major part of that is about making a critical decision. And a critical decision is ultimately using a criteria or a set of views to analyze or assess an argument. If you're at a business roundtable, say you're working for Disney, and you're trying to figure out if this next Marvel movie is going to make a bunch of money, right? That's your criteria, to make money, to turn a profit. So the decisions you make in that boardroom about what movies you're going to greenlight and move forward are affected by that criteria, that set of decision making that forms a critical decision. Additionally, we think about reasonability in argumentation. Based on the critical decision and the criteria that's used to make that decision, you might think of an argument as reasonable if it fits within the criteria of those decision makers. For example, if I was at that board meeting and I was trying to say why we should make a Black Widow movie, I would try to convince people why that would be profitable and that would be effective, perhaps citing the success of movies like Captain Marvel. If I were to come in and say, but it's artistically a really good choice to make this movie, that wouldn't be as reasonable of an argument because it doesn't fit within the criteria of the decision makers at that board meeting to turn a profit. So be thinking about making arguments that fit in the context of the beliefs and values that the people you're trying to convince hold. Additionally, you can think about starting points in argumentation. So starting points are those spots that we all kind of come together from when we form arguments. Language is one of the biggest ways we do that. So language is about using signs and symbols to convey meaning. It can be intentional or unintentional. So me talking to you, that's communication, but even Facebook posts, Twitter posts, images are forms of communication too. But language, the use of symbols to convey meaning, is one of the biggest ways that we make persuasive arguments. So understanding that language means different things for different people is an important way that we can think through these concepts, right? So if I were to say fast, I might be trying to say go quickly, but that has multiple meanings, right? To fast or go on a hunger fast is a very different meaning of that word. So thinking about the different meanings your word has and making sure you're conveying words in a way that makes sense is important. This gets us deeper into this idea of facts. Many of us have a starting point of facts. So to go back to that Disney board meeting example, right? It might be a fact that we generated $1 billion from this film. So we might use that as evidence and say we can all agree that we made this much money. Now we can make more. And so facts serve as sort of a launching point to make additional arguments. Presumptions are basically arguments that we all kind of agree or have a common understanding about. So for example, saying something like gravity is real is probably a presumption, because we all presume and believe that that's the case. If you drop a pencil, right, it's going to fall and hit the ground, and we can all kind of presume and agree that that is true. Probabilities are a little bit different. While presumptions say this thing is true now, a presumption, or a probability rather, says that this is going to be true in the future. So if you say, I've been able to reasonably get up to campus 15 minutes in the past, you might make a probability that you'll be able to go 15 minutes the next time that you go up to campus, and then discover that campus traffic is awful because they have another event going on campus, or construction is going on again. True story. Commonplaces are somewhat similar to these concepts, but commonplaces gets at the ways that arguments and the way that we assess arguments are commonly used. So think about a commonplace as the structure of arguments being very similar. So for example, right, Alabama and other states are pursuing substantial changes to abortion policy. We might see a lot of the arguments that people make in terms of moral arguments against abortion, or a lot of women's rights arguments in favor of allowing these abortion policies to continue, as reflective of commonplaces. So various value claims might be used very frequently when talking about that particular issue. So when we think about forming arguments and forming arguments effectively, what you want to think about is the argument effective to the particular person that's being persuaded? So we think about argumentation, and a lot of you mentioned in your intro course activity about two people going back and forth and disagreeing in some sort of formal debate. But one of the important things is that the two people who are arguing are usually trying to persuade a third person who's ultimately going to make the decision, and is the person we are trying to convince. So rather than trying to persuade each other on the back and forth, oftentimes we do try to convey and persuade that third person. So ultimately what you should think about is, how do I make that third person ultimately believe me? And one way of doing that is thinking, where do they start in terms of their underlying values and beliefs? What are some general assumptions that they have, right? So what are some various starting points that they have? What facts do they believe to be true, right? And then what do I need to convince them? What seems probable, what seems likely, what fits within their views and value set that I can make that argument convincing for? So if you think about argumentation in that way, I think that's a great way to think about the second chapter, is building argumentation in a way that is persuasive to the audience that you're trying to convince. As always, you're welcome to comment in that discussion board if there's any terms or concepts that you'd like me to go into in more detail. Otherwise, best of luck in working through that course activity and quiz for this week, and let me know if you have any questions.